Good morning and good afternoon to you listening into this seminar, which is actually more of a dialogue that we hope to see with you partners of United Nations Development Programme. We live in unprecedented times. Partnerships is more needed than ever before, and new ideas and an improved response to the situation we are in is really needed. We see 9 trillion of costs from the global economy in the coming 2 years, 400 million of lost jobs. And we know that 60% or even above 60% of the global workforce also live out of the informal economy. And we see now towards 100 million people being pushed into extreme poverty. In all of this, UNDP is present in fully operational in 170 countries. And we, of course, want to mobilize our assets in the best of ways. But we cannot do it alone. We need to do it in partnership with colleagues in the UN system and beyond. We have been given the task to lead on the socioeconomic recovery and also to lead with regard to thinking, how could this be done? Already in March, we launched our first offer, repurposing funds, mobilizing also funds to be able to prepare, respond, and support countries in the recovery.
My first session on social.
Sorry? To support countries to prepare to respond and to recover. And we have now developed our ideas of how we could respond even better. And we have called this Beyond Recovery towards 2030, because of course, in the midst of this humanitarian crisis, health crisis, we also need to look at development. We need to see how we, in the midst of the crisis, can support countries and build stronger and more resilient societies. And in this offer that we have now presented in June, we speak about the importance of governance, of social protection, about building in also the green economy in the recovery plans, and also the need for digital disruption. And those of you who have accompanied us and the Human Development Report, you have also seen our concern with regard to the digital field when it comes to increasing inequalities and risks of increasing inequalities. Today, we are going to have a dialogue about the area of social protection. And I will soon have the pleasure to hand over to my colleague, Mansour Dié, who is head of the Inclusive Growth team in our Policy Bureau. But before doing that, I will hand over to my colleague, Haoliang Xu, leading the Policy Bureau. Haoliang, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ulrika. Thank you very much, colleagues, from our member states to join this discussion. My colleague Mansour will talk more about the substance, but to start, I just want to call colleagues' attention to the vision paper that we published a couple of weeks ago about the kind of recovery, or beyond the recovery, we want to see. And the key discussion points of that paper, vision paper, is about the tipping points that led to us to where we are today, but secondly, offer opportunities, to a better future. And one of the tipping points that was mentioned, I just want to quickly refer to it, is a capabilities, revolution started with a forceful drive for universal health coverage, and soon bridged to social protection and care, and the future of work and the basic incomes. So essentially, the social, protection is an important issue that is part of the so-called social contract between the states and the citizens. And starting from health, the basic health, to the future capabilities. So this is what UNDP is trying to do. UNDP is not an agency that people normally associate with the social protection. You talk about ILO, you talk about UNICEF, you talk about many other agencies. But our focus is about the governance issues that underline responsive and accountable institutions that is going to provide the social protection. It's about the resilience of the system And it's also about taking the opportunity of building a social protection system to foster a green transformation. So I think, just with this, few points, just to say that we see social protection really as important and critical, right, to addressing the vulnerability of the poor and the near poor. Today, UNDP is launching this policy paper on temporary basic income. It is part of our work on social protection that's uniquely different from most other agencies. So UNDP is trying to, finding its position to add the value to the work and the debate about social protection. So I will just leave it here. Okay? Thank you very much, Ulrika.
Thank you, and over to you, Mansour, and we will listen to the presentation of the work that UNDP is right now developing with regard to social protection. But the whole idea of this invitation and the series of dialogues that we will have is actually also to listen into your questions and ideas. As I said in the beginning, we can't do this on our own, and we really want to co-create together with partners across our partnerships. So over to you, Mansour.
Thank you so much, Ulrika. I'm really delighted to have this opportunity to address a distinguished audience, member states, to share what our social protection offer is, in this Beyond Recovery for 2030 offer. Let me first start by discussing a little bit where we come from and why this offer is important to us. What we see very clearly is like very large numbers in terms of impact of this COVID, both in terms of poverty, in terms of its impact on hunger, in terms of jobs lost, in terms also of what we have just, titled half the world, which is basically that almost 55% of the world is not covered by social protection, and which is something that this pandemic has evidence, and which is, the way it amplifies inequalities, and which is basically a call for action, because it shows the huge gaps that are out there and that we, need to address. When we look at our role in terms of, the leading role that we have in the social response, and building on the efforts that we have been putting together to accelerate the implementation of the strategic plan, our social protection components of this offer is actually geared towards addressing and protecting people from multiple vulnerabilities. And I think that's what the value addition of UNDP is. It's broad mandate that allows us to connect the dots and cut across practice areas. And that I think that's the unique position that allows us to have a very unique way of addressing social protection. What we see is really the need to use SDGs as our compass, and really to use social protection as a key component to uproot the multidimensional inequalities that we've been seeing, since this whole pandemic started. Of course, the social protection component is part of a bigger offer that also, like you rightly mentioned, covers also governance, which is critical for delivery mechanisms and services. Also, green economy and digital, the digital economy.
Mansour, sorry for interrupting you, but can I ask you to hold your mic closer, because our audience have a difficulty to hear?
Sure, let me do that. Sorry about it. So I was saying that our social protection offer is part of a bigger offer, which of course has different components. And it also shows how the social protection and the COVID offer is also related to the 5 pillars of the UN socio-economic response. Focusing now more specifically on the social protection focus. What we have learned recently is that no single policy instrument in terms of social protection can actually address, the scope and the scope of the challenge. So what we need is really to cut across practice areas, connect the dots, and put together a number of key pillars and practice areas that can actually help us address social protection in a meaningful way. And for that, we have organized our offer around 4 pillars. The first is about cash transfers, financial inclusion, and also includes temporary basic income, universal basic incomes for a renewed social contract. The need to have out-of-the-box ways of addressing social protection is more critical than ever. And we're happy to indicate that today UNDP launches its TBI report, its temporary basic income report, as a means, as a tool, not only the unique tool, but as part of our social protection offer and tool that can help countries and member states address their social protection challenges. So that would be the first pillar. On that one, we'll also be discussing later on, after my presentation, a very specific and concrete example, which is how Togo has actually used cash transfers and leveraged digitalization to reach out to those who are being left behind. The second pillar is about the future of work and inclusive jobs. Here, what we're discussing is the way that we have seen the informal economy impacted hardly, and how by looking into the future, looking at issues related to the gig economy, platform economy, we can leverage those opportunities to enhance job creation, to make sure that jobs are actually inclusive and benefits to those that are being left behind. Here we have lots of examples of concrete initiatives that we are doing on the ground and partnering with different UN agencies and IFIs like the World Bank, like the ILO. For instance, in the Western Balkans, we're working on inclusive labor markets to address social protection issues and make sure that we actually provide empowerment options to those people that are out of the job market. This is also about green jobs, how we leverage green jobs to actually build capacity in terms of offering more opportunities to those who really need to reskill their endowments. Also, one important aspect of this future of work is really how we help migrant workers, informal workers, people with disabilities to really benefit from the opportunities that are out there by providing new skills and their entrepreneurship tools. The third pillar of this social protection offer is about fiscal policy that also reflect care economy and that are inclusive. We've seen how badly the care economy has been affected and hardest hit by this pandemic. So here we have lots of very good examples of what UNDP is doing on the ground. And we have this interesting example that is from India that we call the carepreneurs, which is basically putting together the care economy and entrepreneurs, so carepreneurs, where here we're providing technological access to an entrepreneurship tools to mostly women, but at the same time, providing space and time for women to actually have more care options that allow them to engage more meaningfully in the labor market. So this is really a critical part of our social protection pillars. The fourth one is, of course, universal health care. This whole crisis started with the pandemic, with a health challenge, which of course translated into economic, social, humanitarian, and human rights crisis. So here, lots of advocacy, lots of preparedness and immediate response to really empower the poor to have access to universal health systems. Now, in terms of priorities, progress, and partnerships, I would say we have a number of priorities that we address. And the very first one is fiscal space, because social protection is costly. But more than a cost, it should be perceived as an investment, because that's what it is. It's investing in the future. It's really giving opportunities to the citizens and the people to have options and really enhance their capabilities, like Albion was saying earlier on. So here it's also very important to build a renewed social contract by offering more opportunities and access to resources. So one of the specific focus will be fiscal space, which is either through repurposing what is already there, and that's what a number of countries have been doing. In the developing world, I would say that probably the repurposing is anywhere between 0.2 to 0.5% of GDP, which is nowhere near to the over 11% of the funds and the funding that have been repurposed in the more advanced economies. Technical areas, it's about capacity development and strengthening the design of social protection system for enhanced implementation and monitoring. Social assistance, really lots of ongoing engagement, both with the World Bank and other IFIs, with the ISTB, with KfW, with ILO, labor market solutions, also environment and climate change, because like we said, this social protection offer cuts across practice areas. And we have interesting examples in so many countries where we are actually working on social protection in the environment sector. And those have to do, for instance, in the Asia Pacific region, where we have a number of initiatives like crop insurance in India, weather-based index insurance in the Philippines, or climate risk insurance in Nepal, and adaptive social protection in Bangladesh, and so on and so forth. Definitely leveraging digitalization, which is a tremendous tool. I think this whole pandemic has shown how digitalization can actually unleash the creative power of people to really reach out to those that are left being, further behind. Of course, partnering with the private sector. We're discussing protecting jobs, SMEs, critical bit. The Joint SDG Fund, as you know, UNDP is active in over 18 countries where we're supporting the repurposing, the partial repurposing of the Joint SDG Fund. Working very closely with a number of donors like the European Union, UN Women, ILO, FAO, and so on and so forth, but also building on something that is really, I would say, the DNA of UNDP, which is the integrator role. So here we're putting together and really leveraging the outstanding opportunities that are provided by the Accelerator Labs to really think out of the box and bring about very innovative ways of addressing social protection. Now, what is needed to step up social protection? For us, UNDP, definitely we are fully committed to equip our member states to support the efforts in terms of stepping up social protection, and that's what this offer is about. Now, what we would advise member states, and really our expectation, is to help them look for options across the board. Like we said, there is no silver bullet here. What we need is to find the right mix of social protection tools and instruments that put together and can really, taking into account the specific context of countries, address their very specific challenges. Development partners have also been repurposing their policy, programmatic, and fiscal financial resources. That's something that we definitely encourage. So we're really happy to have this opportunity to engage with you. Look forward to this discussion, this conversation. I think it's more of a dialogue, and really happy to unpack this presentation and get you to the details. I think that's what I wanted to share very briefly, and maybe over to Ulrika or Aliu to give us a deep dive into this novice, a very exciting program that was launched in Togo. Over.
Thank you so much, Mansour, for this comprehensive presentation of a work that is, of course, very interesting to look at. Thank you also for giving also some examples from the work that colleagues are already developing in our program countries. We are happy to invite questions. You can use the chat function, or you can use the Q&A function if you'd like to have. And we have also said that we are happy also to share the PowerPoint presentation and, of course, engage with you on an individual basis if you would like so. But please raise your hands if you're interested to hear more about some of the parts that have been presented, or if you also have ideas. As I said in the beginning, we really want to develop this work together with partners. We're already doing so, and Mansour mentioned it. I would also like to say, of course, on behalf of the Bureau of External Relations and Advocacy, that this would not have been possible to do unless we had our core partners that have along many years enabled us also to do this kind of development of really important work in critical times. It makes it possible for UNDP to plan strategically, but also to act quickly as we have been doing now to meet the crisis. But happy to take on questions or ideas. I don't see that we have any. Would you like, yeah. Let's see. Jihan Hakmini, and sorry for pronouncing your name this way, but Petrask, you have a question to Mansour. Would you like to pose that question verbally? We see it in the chat function, Mansour. The question is that we've mentioned that we're working with IFIs, and if we can expand on that. So are you working on a country-by-country basis or on a pilot model for a region? And do we see any success stories? So maybe you would like to answer, and we're happy, Jihan, if you would like to come in later as well, if you want to follow up. But Mansour, over to you.
Thank you so much for that question. Like I mentioned, we have a number of ongoing partnerships. Let me start, for instance, with the Africa region. We have right now a partnership with the World Bank in 8 countries, and working on 2 main, I would say, pillars. First being social protection system. Really trying to review the social protection system, trying to enhance them, trying to look at the gaps and how we close those gaps. And also a second pillar on digitalization, how to leverage digital tools to actually enhance delivery mechanism using, for instance, big data, using issues related to how to leverage technology like mobile phone. And this is exactly the case of what happened in Togo. And I think when Aliou shares this example, it will give more insight as to what are the current opportunities. Of course, we also have in a number of countries where the social registry is fully digitized. And those are the kind of partnership that we have, for instance, with the Islamic Development Bank right now in Somalia, where we're working on social protection. We have really, I would say, both the World Bank, the European Union, the Islamic Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and a number of other IFIs with which we are currently working on social protection initiative. I'll be happy to share maybe a number of links, and I'm just asking my colleagues Renata and Claudia just to share a number of links on those specific examples so that they really can have a closer look at what we're doing with IFIs.
Renata, please come in and.
Hi, good morning. Apologies because I don't have a camera functioning where I am right now. Just to state very briefly that 126 countries globally have either introduced or adopted social protection schemes. And we see that majority of those trying to use cash-based programs because for the immediate action and mitigation of the socioeconomic impacts of COVID in these initial months. And we see also other schemes, types of social assistance, particularly on food distribution. With the IFIs particularly, we've been doing a lot of work with the World Bank for social impact assessments related to protecting people and social protection schemes, particularly on informal workers and needs particularly of households led by women or women entrepreneurs that have worked in micro, small, medium enterprises and that are likely not making an income due to the lockdowns. So we have a lot of a bulk of information emerging from the social economic impact assessments with the World Bank. We are working also very closely with the regional development banks. So African Development Bank, we have a few countries where we are leading a lot of work, such as in Uganda, with assessment of vulnerability for the protection of the poor, that includes social protection schemes. But I also would like to highlight that in a lot of countries, UNDP on its technical lead role on socioeconomic impact assessment for the UN is facilitating a platform which actually brings different technical specialized UN agencies with the IFIs, and that's where we exactly see the work with IFIs growing, particularly for the pillar 4 on the macroeconomic issues of the UN socio-economic immediate response, and pillar 3 on the economic recovery, which includes protectionist schemes and SMEs transfers. In Uzbekistan, for instance, working with IFIs, including the Asian Development Bank, the IMF, and the World Bank, UNDP has worked with the IFIs not just to do the assessment, but brought also ILO, UNICEF, and other specialized agencies to put specific measures in place. So if you look at the UN response plan for Uzbekistan, which leverages $3 billion for the next 18 months, with concrete measures, and great portion of it is for the protection of informal workers and the most vulnerable. Over to you, Ulrika. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renata. And that also answers the question of an anonymous attendee that we have with us, who was asking about how we make sure that the implementation of the social protection programs will be in line with the priorities and needs of host countries. I mean, working in coordination with the assessment is incredibly important. We've also seen a somewhat fatigue with regard to assessment. So UNDP really, in our leadership of the socioeconomic recovery plans, strive to work in coordination, as you've heard the colleagues say. We have also a question from a colleague from Kyrgyzstan asking Mansour about the cooperation we have with public bodies and NGOs. Would you like to take that one on or pass it to another colleague?
Happy to answer that. As you know, and thanks Ulrika, and thanks for that question. As you know, our approach has been really to have broad partnerships. So we start with state partnerships. So it's really, government. And in order to do it in a very transparent way, what we have in mind is to also open that to civil society organization. And let me here give you a very specific example. It's with Diego, which, as you know, is a European Union-based, think tank on social protection that we work with very closely in the theme of informal economy and informal sector. So this is how we work. It's really bringing about, the government that is in the driver's seat, but making sure that to ensure that what we do trickles down to the communities and the people. We also bring in the picture, different voices like the private sector, like public entities and TSO. So that is really systematic in our approach to, I would say, not only to social protection, but to UNDP's approach in general. And it's more so, true in the area of social protection, given the current need, the pressure on transparency and accountability. So that's really, what we do. Over.
Yeah, Ulrika, maybe I can just make a few comments on some of the questions raised. Yeah. So, yeah. So on, social protection, I just want to mention that the UN Joint SDG Fund, has funded 35 projects for social protection, and 20% of which, have been repurposed for COVID response. But most of these projects, by nature, have relevance for COVID response. And out of the 35 projects, UNDP is a part of the part of the 19 projects. Okay, because all these projects are joint, UN projects at country team level, right? So UNDP is participating in 19 of the 35 projects, in 3 or 4 of which UNDP is a lead agency. In most cases, the UNDP is a participating agency, because the UNDP's niche in social protection can complement the niches of other agencies. And many of these projects that the UNDP participates in addresses service delivery, including health coverage, including social protection delivery at local levels, and including in collaboration with different organizations, including NGOs, and targeting vulnerable populations such as elderly and the most vulnerable and so forth. So there's a lot of country level case studies, including multi-country case studies that UNDP is involved in social protection. Now, for all these projects, it will require the government endorsement at the senior level. Because for the joint SDG fund, to fund any projects, it must have endorsement of the government at the senior level, right? As well as the endorsement of the resident coordinators. So I think so. This is one thing that we're doing, right, through this joint SDG fund. And then the joint SDG fund recently also funded the 62 SDG financing projects focusing on INFFs, Integrated National Financing Framework, that are that's going to have significant long-term impact on how financing for development, right, is going to be implemented at country level, especially in the COVID or post-COVID situation. So for the 62 proposals, UNDP is part of the 54 of these proposals. So UNDP, again, we will look at financing issues because many of the social protection measures will require the governments to prioritize their fiscal, spendings properly. So UNDP also, is going to support, the social protection in that regard. For if you talk about the universal health care, right? So you do need to have a proper schemes at country level, right, to have the right system. Okay. If you talk about social protection such as temporary payments, right, and we're talking about significant amount of financial resources that needs to be repurposed or reprioritized. How do you balance between fossil fuel subsidies and the money you spend to target the poor and the vulnerable, right, through social protection schemes? So that is more progressive and so forth. So the UNDP, again, is trying to connect dots, look at the social protection not only as a simple, traditional ways of social protection, but really from a systems transformation point of view to look at this. Some examples that we're supporting, okay, in countries such as Bangladesh, right? We are working with governments, to expand the social protection system. The issues, in many developing countries is that in the countries normally there's not strong enough, a digital system, registries of poor and vulnerable, right, to whom the governments can direct the targeted support. So one of the challenges is always, to include the vulnerable people who are invisible, right, in the formal systems, in the formal visible system. So I think Bangladesh has developed a very strong system of digital service delivery. So we're working with them to build on what we have done, and to develop an online, so-called online shock responsive social protection data system, right, with the Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief. And I think we're targeting about 12.5 million people, so that this most vulnerable group of people, can be supported. In India, as you know, the government has very, very strong systems of social programs. Right? There's very famous mission, right, that provides temporary jobs, for anyone who requires a job, for 6 months, during a period of 1 year, right? So what we're working with the government is to expand access, to such social protection schemes, right, in 9 states. So, and in this regard, we work very closely, with the state governments and building on the systems that we have built in India together with the government. For example, the electronic vaccine management network, right? Because there's a network and there's a platform that we can capitalize on, right? And so that we're help the government expand, public access, to jobs, right? Because to have jobs, again, you need to be eligible. You need to have identity. You need to have a job cards, right? So all these, issues require systems, capacity, right? And collaboration, and also learning, across the board. So these are some of the examples that we do. If there are time, and depending on the question, we can give more examples. My colleagues can also do so. Over to you, Ulrika.
Thank you so much. And we had a question about experiences of working with mobile money services in Bangladesh. Marina, who is with us, says that this is, of course, a big problem to poor people to reach the mobile money focal point in the living area. So I don't know if you have an example of that, and also if we could bring up some examples, and we can also perhaps post a link, Nick, to the experiences we've had also using the Accelerator Labs that were launched in September 2019, and how the Accelerator Labs have also been part of our global response. But anyone who would like to speak about mobile money services?
Yeah.
Mansoor? Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy to do, and probably maybe a good time to introduce and ask Aliu maybe to share the Novice program, which is what it is about. Because what the Novice does, for instance, and to address this issue, is exactly to have two specific mechanisms. One is about the redress mechanism. For those who are facing challenges and are really having complaints, have not been able to access the system. So there is a help desk also that is there to support those citizens and communities that are facing challenges. I think this is an important problem to raise as we also, work towards building community-based social protection systems, which are basically helping remote communities to access, cash transfer systems. And we have such programs going on in a number of regions. So maybe that's what I wanted to add, and maybe a good opportunity to ask Aliu to discuss a little bit the Togo case. Thanks.
Hao-Liang, would you like to come back and also mention how we make use of the Accelerator Labs and new ways of working and innovating within UNDP?
Yeah, and Accelerator Labs, as you know, is a new capacity that UNDP has put in 16 country offices to support our governments. And their ability is to map existing and emerging solutions very quickly and help our country office to respond. So I think many country offices have been using this capacity very effectively. And for example, in terms of mobile payments, there's a strong network of colleagues who are actually learning from each other, and not only from UNDP and but also from other agencies. UNDP has developed a mobile payment system, for many years, starting I think in the Philippines, during the high-end response in 2013, 2014. And so since then, that application has been replicated or used in many countries. And of course, UNDP is not the only agency. Many other agencies have used it, such as WFP and others. So I think we can provide some more details in the chat box shortly on the kind of examples we have. And so I think the Accelerator Labs, essentially is a capacity that country office didn't have, but now they do have for quick solutions mapping, and also for cross country office learning. So I think. And also what's important to note is that, we're trying to emphasize that Accelerator Labs is not just, for experimentation type of, activities. It's really, to support the governments, to deal with the complex issues. Right? So Accelerator Labs is not a capacity simply to look at, what's needed in the current, but really to deal with some of the fundamental issues. For example, if you look at social protection systems, right, and we know that it is very complex for developing countries because that in developed countries you have a lot of tools, right, that are available, including social protection schemes, unemployment insurance, you have work follow programs, and so forth. Right? These tools are not available, at country office level, at developing countries. So what do we do? How do we deal with these kind of issues? Right? Even for temporary basic income, right? If the government has a political will to do it, then how do you deal with the digital registration system to include the people who needed to be targeted and so forth? Right? So Accelerator Labs, can also work with our governments on these kind of more systemic issues.
Thank you so much, Hao-Liang. And Nick, thank you also for posting the link to the development of the work done on these platforms called Accelerator Labs. There are also a lot of interesting examples, actually. They're also looking at the COVID response and how our colleagues also working in the labs have been an integral part of UNDP's response in a number of countries, not least in sub-Saharan Africa. Mansour, Aliou, or any of the other colleagues, Renata, would you like to come in? We don't have more questions that I can see. If I haven't missed one, please tell me if so, but...
We have one raised hand.
We have a raised hand. So can we then see if we can ask... I can't see it now, but can we ask the participant to come in and ask the question?
Onsimo?
Yeah, now I see Ansimo Musive. Can I ask my colleagues to unmute? Is it possible to do so? If not, then I will have to ask you to write your question. Ricky, is it possible to unmute?
We requested already.
Onsimo, you can unmute yourself and talk.
Okay. Onsimo, you're welcome. If you would like to ask your question or if you have ideas, you can just unmute yourself. Or otherwise, Mansour, I'll hand over to you to yeah, so we have a question, let's see now, from Kyrgyzstan about additional comments on the question about UNDP's assistance in research of experience of NGOs' engagement in fighting COVID-19. So this was a question asked earlier, and what kind of possibilities are there also to work more closely with UNDP if you represent an NGO? Can we see if we have some examples of that one? So would you like to take it on?
Yes, thank you so much for your questions. I think right now there are probably different opportunities. One is, as you know, we're developing a number of human development reports that are country-based, and when we do that research, it actually opens, you know, to NGOs, CSOs, really the broader development community. So that is definitely a clear entry point, and that's what we're doing right now, for instance, in Uruguay, really bringing the whole development partners to work together and do some research that can be actually used to inform how best to run the policy making for the government. So second option is that as we support countries repurpose or enhance, upgrade their social protection systems, definitely there is space for you to also engage. And we're happy if you have, you know, specific contact to share with us to link you with the relevant people that we have in the country offices. And the third one is the number of socioeconomic impact assessment that my colleague Renata was mentioning, and during which, you know, it's really an open process where we look at all the opportunities, we look at the gaps, you know, what are the needs, and of course that's a dialogue. It's an open dialogue where we bring in all relevant stakeholders, and we'll be happy also to have you on board. So I would say options are many, and we're happy to, you know, look at your very specific need and see how best to connect you with, you know, the right entry point so that we can take on board your research needs.
Certainly, and also, of course, our colleagues in the regional bureau are happy also to be in contact with you, and we can also provide these contacts after this webinar. Hao-Liang, we also have a question, how UNDP, I mean, you said in the beginning that we work with integrated solutions to complex problems, and this is certainly the case now. So the question is how we also integrate our work on climate change. And you mentioned, and this is also part of our offer, that the green economy needs to be part of the economy as we build, perhaps not back, but we build towards the future and towards 2030, as we have said in our offer. So could you give an example? And perhaps the report we have launched today actually speaks about the possibilities to combine solutions with regard to climate change with solutions on social protection, as we suggest also the idea of using subsidies as part of the funding base for the temporary basic income. Over to you, Julian.
I think, yeah, so since the focus of this discussion is very narrow, right, is on social protection. So I will give one example on this, social protection and link it to green recovery. I think in Pakistan, there's a very good example. The government of Pakistan has set a very ambitious goal of planting 10 billion trees. Okay, and so I think in response to COVID, obviously a lot of informal workers, so a bigger chunk of the vulnerable population has lost opportunities of income, right? So what we're working with the government to do is to hire these people on a temporary basis to plant trees. That was a government priority, to deal with climate change, right? So in a way, this way you provide the temporary jobs, temporary income, and as a way of social protection, but also addressing the long-term issue of climate change, right? The carbon capture and climate mitigation measures. So I think this is a good example of social protection being used for green recovery, right? And the rural employment scheme I mentioned earlier in India is similar, because it is also it has been there for some time, to provide social protection, job guarantee, right, for the vulnerable sections of the population. But at the time of COVID, it is become immediately more relevant, right? Because a lot of the projects they deal with are infrastructural projects that are important for recovery. If in the process you focus on nature neutral projects, I think, or neutral nature positive projects, I think then you provide more opportunities to link social protection with economic recovery. So there are good examples that can be done.
Ulrika, if I may just add maybe to some more ideas, and the big one is, of course, into the temporary basic income report that is being launched. One of the ideas being to phase out fossil fuel subsidies to fund social protection. That is really the systemic way of going about it. Very specific, approaches that UNDP has been, advocating for and actually implementing in the field is about green jobs linked to social protection. It's also about climate-based insurance. Really, for instance, for small-scale holders, making sure that we are actually providing insurance that help them to cope, the mitigation adaptation challenges, and yet being able to invest more in sustainable consumption and production, which is basically a triple win. You're investing in the economy, you're doing social, but at the same time, you're also leveraging, the environment. So I would say here we also have lots of good examples that we're happy to share with links for colleagues to look at. Maybe before we close, I'm just wondering whether it's a good time for you to come in, Ulrika.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mansour. Thank you, Ulrika. Thank you, Hao-Liang, for this opportunity. Very quickly, I just want to share with you the Novice program that the government of Togo has been rolling out for the last 4 months, since April 8. It is a digital cash transfer program in response to the COVID, and it targets mainly the informal workers in the capital city of Togo. Just to say that for now, Togo has reached around 800 cases with 15 deaths, and the situation seems to be very okay. So at the early beginning of the COVID crisis, the government has put in place some curfew in the greater Lomé area, border closure, and they restricted access to main urban centers in order to contain the situation, and then intensified testing and contact tracing, which has been absolutely important. So in order not to increase the poverty rate, as you know, in Togo, the poverty rate is about 50% of the population. And because of those measures, the government has decided very quickly to start doing implementing a social protection program using the digital economy, digital cash transfers, and so on and so forth. So basically, to go fast into the whole thing, so it's a social intervention targeting informal workers, as I said, in order to to provide quick money to informal workers. But what's important here is this program is 100% digital, 100% digital onboarding via USSD menu. People call and then they register. So far, they have dispersed about 20 million US dollars, which is about 12 billion CFA to 567 people. Those are the beneficiaries, which is roughly about 15% of adult population in Togo. So the registration so far has reached 1,300,000 people. And then so 65% of the beneficiaries are women, which is quite important. But what happened here is the government has decided to give more to women than to men. Which is quite innovative, because they feel like, you know, whenever you give money to the women, they will spend it with the family. They don't go and have a drink with it outside, you know. So they have decided to give more to the women. So they were giving $20 for women, while they were giving $18 or $17 to men. So what the government has done, I think that has been raised already by Hauliang and by the others. They really did not have, the country has really a big problem on identifying those who are the vulnerable. So there is a big lack of national database of vulnerable people. So what they have decided then to do is to use the voter ID card, the voter ID database, because they have recent presidential elections in February this year, so it's quite recent. So they decided to use it. They hope, and then why? Because in the voter ID database, they have already like 3.6 million people. 3.6 million Togolese have a voter ID, so which is about 93% of the all adult in the country, which is quite very, very, very significant. And then what they have done is also to make sure that people, you know, who are, how do you now identify those people who are informal workers? I mean, the voter ID also had a line where, you know, the profession is clearly indicated. So if you come there and in the voter ID, you know, it's you are a teacher, for example, they will not give you, because if they go through the system, they will see effectively that if you are working in the informal sector, yes or no. So it was very easy for them. So far, as I said, they have dispersed 20 million US dollars very quickly in 4 months. So they were giving more to men, like $20 every 4 weeks to men, and $17 every 4 weeks to women, to men. So I mean, just to, in a nutshell, just to say that they have now suspended the program, because I think the initial money that they had has been fully given to the beneficiaries. So now the government is very active on mobilizing additional money to keep running the program, because they think it's absolutely important. But in order to do that, they really need to build a very strong digital ID system, so that they can identify people. So they are talking to the donors, and the World Bank is currently funding this, what they call the EID Togo. The World Bank is giving them $50 million to really to set up this program. And UNDP is also part of this process. Our Accelerator Lab is working with the ministry in charge of the novice program to really, you know, help them on identifying and setting up this platform. So far, what they have decided to do now is really to build a more stronger digital payment for social protection systems. So I mean, everybody is fully involved. One of the ideas also they have is really to see how they can use build a big data capability for data-driven policy design that's going to really help them scale this program. So far, just one last point: the program has been only being rolled out in the capital city in Lomé and in one of the provinces that were also hardly impacted by the COVID. But now the idea of the government is really to extend it nationwide. So that's why they need really to mobilize more resources, but also they need to build a more robust system that's going to be easy for them to identify those who are the vulnerables and then provide the resources to them. So UNDP is part of all this process, and I will be happy to share more if there are questions. Over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aliou, and also thank you, Renata, for sharing a lot of useful information that I hope that you see in the chat function. The talk example is also an example that you find in the report that UNDP has launched today with regard to temporary basic income. And it also shows, I think, the strengths of UN agencies with the coverage we have worldwide and how we can learn from each other. We see scarce development finance these days, as I said in the beginning of the seminar. We see decrease of ODA, decrease of remittances, and we really need to work together to develop the best ideas how to support countries and people to build stronger and resilient societies. And the offer that we have developed, moving us beyond recovery towards 2030, also with the promise also to see to that we can think along the lines and the strengths of UNDP, is an offer that we would like to develop together with you and a number of partners, as you've seen. And you are most welcome, or if you find it interesting, also to invite other people to be with us tomorrow, as we will discuss in our second session of this dialogue series, Digital Disruption. Friday, 24th of July, 9 to 10, same time tomorrow. And then we will move into a discussion and presentation about our offer with regard to green economy on Thursday, 27th of August, same time. And then at the end, the fourth part, an incredibly important part of our offer, also how we work with governance, building a new social contract that is, of course, so badly needed in most member states across the world. So I hope that we will see you and that you also would like to invite other colleagues. I thank my colleagues also for sharing this work that we have been developing so far with regard to social protection. You know our names, you know where to find us. My name is Ulrika Mondé and I represent the Bureau for External Relations and Advocacy. We have Haoliang Xu leading our policy work and the colleagues there, so thank you so much. And we are of course ready any day also to provide you with additional information. We have promised also to share these links and also the PowerPoint presentation of Mansour to those of you who participated in the call today. So looking forward to see you in our next session already tomorrow. Thank you very much and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.